Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be taking a look at Carina Challenges Volume 3.0 Machine Learning. So it is in Eternity of Pain Acceptance, and the guide is also on the same sheet as I have been creating the previous one. So this is the third guide. If you want to look at the previous videos, check them out in my channel history. But you can also just have the same spreadsheet here, and this is a new tab now for machine learning. As always in this guide, obviously these are my kind of opinions and my experiences, and I have left here basically a place for you to plan your own run with the list of every single champion that does qualify for the objective. And with that, let's take a look at basically what I recommend doing. And in this case, I do not think that one side is particularly all that much easier than the other side. I think you can go either side, depending which fights you feel more comfortable with. And for some it will be the left one, for some it will be the right one. And the team suggested here, as always, your kind of initial champ is Hercules, of whom you will definitely benefit more on the left side path, because you're going to Hercules the Herc, the Havoc, and Nick Fury. Against Nick Fury, you can quite literally use any other champions as well. But then you will need Warlock to deal with Warlock. This side is only really viable if you do have a Warlock, I would say. If you do not have a highly ranked Warlock, I would not go to the left side, because you do need to be able to basically armor break and ideally have some tech boosts on to just spam some level 2s and nuke that fight down. And then swap out your Herc for Nebula, because Nebula works decently well against MODOK, because whilst MODOK is shocked or incinerated, he cannot auto-block. And with that, you should be able to have much more moderately reasonable fight in a sense. And obviously, Nebula is also basically your only and best option for Dragon Man. So again, Nebula is a pivotal champion for this run. And then for Blade, you can use virtually any champion. It's just going to be a fairly lengthy fight. Here, the recommendation on my team would be Warlock, just because we're bringing him in already. You can probably get away with using other champions too, but I recommend Warlock. And Terax, here's probably where you would want to use Ultron. Possibly someone else. The key here is Dragon Man should be working quite decently well as well if you want to swap out your Ultron for Dragon Man, because you do take less degeneration damage if Terax has multiple debuffs on them. So with Ultron, well, actually Ultron's not going to work here, so we're going to swap that. I just realized that Ultron is not going to work there, so you want Dragon Man, because Terax is bleeding in. But Dragon Man, obviously being arm broken, he's going to be degening the Terax. That's going to be useful. And then you can spam your level 1s or level 2s in order to get debuffs on Terax. And with that, reduce the amount of degeneration that you are taking. So it's a good thing that I caught myself here. Otherwise, I wouldn't hear the end of it in comment section. So here we're going to go with Dragon Man instead of Ultron. And it works out as a fairly reasonable run. On path 2, against Dormammu, Guillotine 2099 is a solid solo option, probably the better one that you can have here, because it's all about power control in this fight. It's all about knocking that Dormammu down and just throwing the degen back at him. Then for Bishop, you can use, you know, a bunch of different robots. Here I listed Ultron as a possible option, but also Hercules, obviously, assuming that is who you bring in. Crossbones can be done with virtually any of the robots as well, or most of the robots. Here I listed Guillotine 2099 for this run, just because she can amp her damage up. And ideally, if you do finish with the level 3 this fight, then you're going to have much easier time against the Scorpion in that fight, which is going to be super helpful. So if you can carry over the 100 combo, that will be very helpful. And then over here, Hercules. Here, swap out, swap Hercules, swap Herc for, who are we putting in? Dragon Man. Whoops. Caps lock. Hate caps lock. Or Dragon Man. And then you would end up using Ultron against Kraven. Should be working out relatively decently, considering that Ultron's functions cannot have their ability accuracy reduced, so you will still be proccing your armor ups, everything else. Against Scorpion, recommendation here would be ramped up Guillotine 2099 or Ultron. Ultron should do decently well as well with that regen. And then against Icarus, your best bet is Dragon Man. Again, without Dragon Man, I probably would not want to do this side run, namely because of Icarus. I suppose Warlock can kind of do this Icarus as well, with basically just punishing Icarus's level 1s and heavy attacks with heavies of your own, but it is quite a bit trickier. And then against Penny, Ultron is actually quite decently good option there. Speaking of good options, here is a potential list. Some of these options are better than others, but as always, we're basically working with a small list of champions. So against Hercules, in theory, you can use pretty much everyone. It doesn't matter that much. Ideally, if you do not have too many abilities that you have to proc, and if you do have big crit rate, that is a huge benefit that works extremely well with that intercept node. Then against Havoc, again, you can use vast majority of the champions that do not dish out energy damage on the daily. Against Warlock, again, in this run, only Warlock himself qualifies. Obviously, you can bring in somebody like CGR or Scarlet Witch or somebody else that can deal with that fight, but out of all of the robot champions, only Warlock can deal with this. Warlock, technically Sentinel can as well, but it is going to be an absolute miserable fight, which I absolutely do not recommend. So I'd say out of all the robots, again, you can bring in somebody else that can do this fight, but, you know, out of all of the robots, it's just the Warlock here. Against Nick Fury, you can use vast majority of the robots yet again. Darkhawk, Dragon Man, Guillotine 2099, Ultron, Warlock. And then against MCOC, it would be Nebula, Sentinel, and Warlock. Warlock should be working relatively decently as well, because you can reparry and heavy, and then you can throw your level 1, and if he's infected especially, you will be placing that shock on him, which means he will not be auto-blocking, and then it would be basically just kind of like level 1 spam strategy there, because your power is going to get constantly drained. Against Blade, again, you can use most of the champions, but if you have some form of power control, the fight becomes much more tolerable. Otherwise, it's just baiting out a ton of special attacks. Against Terax, we have Dragon Man, Guillotine 2099 potentially can work. Maybe Warlock potentially. Haven't tested that out myself. And against Dragon Man, it's quite literally Nebula or just Team Revives, because that fight is quite tricky. And you can use Nebula, I'd say Dragon Man or Team Revives, because Dragon Man also does have slow mechanic on his level 1. It's not the best slow, but it could be enough. It could be helpful enough. And obviously Nebula completely shuts down robot abilities altogether, or you're just gonna have to basically revive your way through it. Moving on to path 2, we have against Dormammu. Again, you want to either have access to slow or power control. So Guillotine 2099, Dragon Man, Visions can work there. Against Bishop, Darkhawk, Guillotine 2099, Omega Sentinel, Ultron, Visions work. Crossbones, pretty much any of the robots, to more or less. Overseer, I'd possibly say Ultron might do well as Dragon Man, maybe Omega Sentinel. That fight will get annoying if you do not have a good counter though. And the longer you stay in that fight, the more painful it is, because you are forced to throw special attacks, and if your abilities fail on special attacks, then you take a bunch of damage. Now against Kraven, it's a Dragon Man, Ultron, Warlock, Darkhawk, Sentinel. Probably Ultron and Dragon Man are the better ones, because if you can get Kraven to his corner, with Dragon Man you can do decent amount of damage, especially if he throws his level 2s. He does get that precision buff, which will let you do some extra damage there. And then obviously Ultron. Against Scorpion, Guillotine 2099, especially if she's ramped up, and because she has some regen abilities, you do need to play very slow, basically like parry, 2-3 hit combos, ideally, in order to make sure you do not get out-of-weight and smacked in the face. Warlock works very well against Scorpion with parry heavy playstyle, and Omega Sentinel is arguably the best, safest counter, because you're going to have infinite regen there. Then we have Icarus, where I'd say Dragon Man, Warlock, potentially Visions there, and Guillotine 2099 if you are very comfortable and confident in that fight. And then against Penny Parker, I'd say it's Ultron, or just use Team Revives and try to brute force it through, because virtually none of the robots really have direct great counter abilities, but Ultron does do that fight relatively well. So that is just about it. This is one of the trickier runs that I would say. And again, I fully expect those comments where, you know, what do I do if I don't have these, and these champions? As I said, you need to figure out which side you're going to go with, because I would not recommend going left side if you do not have a ranked up warlock. If you do have a ranked up warlock, then arguably go left. And I would absolutely not go right side if you do not have Ultron and Guillotine 2099, I would say. Everything else you can probably kind of interchange a bit. But Guillotine 2099 and Ultron, go right. And Warlock, go left. That would ultimately be my recommendation. And that's pretty much it. If you do have more nuanced questions, I will try to get them tomorrow. As I mentioned in the previous video, it has been a fairly rough day for me, and some health issues are flaring up, so no stream tonight. I apologize for that, guys. But hopefully I'm gonna see you tomorrow morning. See ya. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about